I'm Soledad O'Brien. Welcome to Matter of Fact. Congress is set for another showdown once members return on Monday, this time over food. The House and Senate must merge their dueling farm bills. Since 1933, farm bills have included a nutrition plan or food stamps. Today, that's known as SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It helps 42 million Americans put food on the table. The average household receives $256 a month, or roughly $1.40 per meal per person. The Senate passed a bipartisan version of the bill, virtually keeping SNAP intact. But the House wants to see tougher work requirements for SNAP recipients. David Super is a professor at Georgetown Law School, where he specializes in public welfare law. So nice to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Can you walk me through the two versions, the Senate version and the House version of the new Farm Bill?
Sure. The Senate would take the existing work programs in the SNAP program and consolidate them and strengthen them to try to help people get jobs and get better jobs. The House approach is radically different than anything we've seen before. It would make people prove that they're working at least 20 hours a week in order to get food stamps every month. If people got laid off, they'd lose their food stamps when they need them the most.
You have called that strikingly inhumane in an article that you wrote. Why do you say that?
Because when people lose their jobs, they need food more than any other time. And many of the people that would be affected by this are people who lose jobs for legitimate reasons. They were working the Christmas rush and they get laid off after the holidays.
This used to be a bipartisan issue. I mean, the Farm Bill and how people thought about hunger in this country was not a Democratic issue or a Republican issue, right?
Yes, absolutely. Some of the biggest leaders in setting up the food stamp program were Richard Nixon, Bob Dole, Richard Lugar, Thad Cochran, who just retired, but we don't see that anymore.
What changed?
Everything gets politicized, everything gets partisan. There's less and less room for individual conscience.
There are a lot of people who would say, hey, listen, if you're not one of the 12% of elderly people who are covered by SNAP, or the 44% of SNAP recipients who are children, or the 9% who are disabled, that's roughly a third left over, why shouldn't you have to work to get your SNAP?
I think everyone supports the idea of people working. The fact is that the SNAP program is for workers. Those that are not working are typically the elderly, people with disabilities, or sometimes people who don't formally have a disability, but maybe they broke their leg and they can't work for a couple months until they heal.
Is the issue, though, that the way the states run the program is that the jobs are hard to come by?
Well, the problem jobs are hard to come by is that SNAP serves a lot of people with very low skills who are very expendable to their employers, so they get hired when there's work to do and get laid off immediately after the work ends. So they often are working at unstable jobs, unstable hours. Many of them have regular jobs, but sometimes don't get enough shifts to average 20 hours a week.
What do we learn under the Clinton administration, which had a look at work rules as well?
Well, we know there's a big difference between requiring people to take jobs or go to training or look for work if they can, which is a completely legitimate thing, and which the Clinton administration and other administrations back to President Nixon required. That's one thing. And cutting people off if they can't find a job is another. No one objects, and indeed the Senate would strengthen the provisions for cutting off people if they don't do what they can do. But if you're looking for work and you come up empty, or your boss doesn't give you enough hours that month, you shouldn't lose your food stamps.
I think there's a fair amount of misunderstanding around the SNAP program, and maybe welfare in general. There's a sense that there's a tremendous amount of fraud, and there's a sense that people get on SNAP and they are there for literally years and years and years.
That's not true, as it turns out. All the studies we have show that fraud has been radically decreasing. There are enormous efforts made to eradicate what little bit is left, but the program is much cleaner than many government programs serving a more affluent population. And in terms of people staying on the program, people go off very quickly. For adults who are neither elderly nor disabled, about half of them leave the program within 6 months of when they come on the program. And many of those that stay on for a while, it's because they have jobs that are paying very low wages. If you're working full-time at the minimum wage, supporting a family of 4, you're only at 60% of the poverty line. So SNAP can make the difference between feeding your family and going hungry.
What do you predict is going to happen as the Senate and the House have to figure out how to get these two versions into one?
I don't know. I think we could be looking at an impasse because the House bill is so radical, it's hard to imagine even doing part of that without causing enormous hardship. So there's strong bipartisan concern about the House proposal.
Professor Super, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You bet. Appreciate it.